2 nights before my son's wedding, I found out his fiancée slept with my husband. I still attended the ceremony, but I didn't bring a gift. I turned the ceremony into payback. The ballroom glittered under soft chandeliers, crystal glasses chimed against fine china, and the murmur of servers glided like a silent tide through the air. Silk-draped tables shimmered beneath floral centerpieces. The scent of white roses and polished wood hinted at perfection. I stood quietly by the beverage cart, emerald velvet draping my frail frame from shoulders to ankles, my hair silvered by time and resilience. I held a silver tray of empty wineglasses in one trembling hand, while concealing the photographs and evidence from the private investigator in the other. At 78, I had weathered storms more ferocious than this, yet tonight felt different. A reckoning was gathering beneath polite laughter and rehearsed smiles. The organizers adjusted chairs for the final walkthrough of the ceremony. The bridal party paused to confer over the order of arrival. My presence seemed to fray their composure, though none dared say it aloud. Sarah, the radiant bride-to-be, swept down the aisle with a practiced grace. Her ivory lace gown hugged her figure, her smile calibrated for cameras. She paused at my elbow and leaned in, her voice syrupy yet razor-sharp. "Where do you expect to sit at the reception? Under the table? Someone like you does not deserve a seat among my family." She parted her lips in a polite grin before swiveling her head toward the other bridesmaids, as though my existence were an inconvenient stain on the perfect tableau. I froze for a fraction of a heartbeat, then maintained my posture without flinch. The tray trembled, yet did not drop. I let the hum of the chandelier lights and the distant clink of utensils cloak my steady breath as I folded my hands more firmly around the tray. The moment passed, but the air around me crackled with tension. Nathan, my son, stepped up beside her. His jaw was tight, and his eyes remained fixed on his fiancée. His voice dropped low, each word deliberate. "Stay away from the guests, mother. Do not scare anyone. That old shadow of yours is already enough to ruin this night." He paused, as though savoring the sting before continuing. But I did not respond. I did not look at him. I only felt the old ache in my chest. 78 years of memory, love, sacrifice, now confronted with cold betrayal. Still I stood, unmoving, anchored in silent dignity. Then came Henry's mocking laughter. His voice ricocheted off the marble floors and high ceilings. "Jealous of youth, aren't we, old crone? Look at Sarah. Fresh-faced, accomplished. Meanwhile, all you have left is dust and memories." He leaned into me as he spoke, eyes gleaming with condescension. "Go on, go home and prepare dinner for your precious son, you old witch." His words cut through the orchestra of hushed voices and soft music. He believed he was clever, quipping, performing, but I recognized contempt when I saw it. He believed this was a family moment. I knew it was the overture. I gripped the tray harder. Under the silver surface, in my purse, lay the small box of truth, a veritable Pandora's box I had prepared for this night. On the tray, the empty glasses glimmered as if they sought answers I had no intention of providing verbally. The organizers continued their work, oblivious to the storm gathering in my heart. I recalled our early days, Henry and I, full of youthful promise, exchanging vows under a canopy of autumn leaves. We had built a modest home together, planted our first marigolds and peaches, and stitched our dreams into the mortar of that foundation. Over the decades, we raised Nathan with warmth and dedication. And then somewhere, nearly in secret, Henry began to unmoor himself, first with small lies, then whispers, safe-looking deviations from our life. He had hidden the photographs carefully in a drawer, hidden the hotel bills, hidden the messages. I discovered them only when the private investigator handed me the evidence 2 nights ago. Since then, I had been preparing. I had been transforming myself from heartbroken wife and dignified mother into an instrument of truth. The rehearsed perfection of this night served as both stage and trap. Sarah's words repeated in my mind, spiking fresh determination and cold clarity. Nathan's own admission, loud and brutal, sealed my conviction. They believed me powerless, a relic. They had underestimated my decades of endurance and my capacity for justice. Tonight, that ended. I set the tray down gently on a nearby service cart and brushed a stray fleck of velvet from my dress. My back straightened, my shoulders, bent from years of care, lifted firm and proud. I tucked my fingers into the purse hiding beneath my arm. Nothing would change until the cake was cut, until the guests witnessed the unveiling. I was patient. I studied Sarah's back as she rejoined Nathan, their figures framed by floral archways, and practiced choreography. She placed her hand in his. He tightened his grip on her arm. They believed they were unstoppable. But truth had other plans. A soft chime from the planning coordinator snapped me back. It was nearly showtime. The cake, 3 tiers of ivory fondant, stood on a satin-clad table beneath a golden canopy, the finishing touch on their illusion. I inhaled, tasting the faint scent of buttercream and smashed hopes around it. I tucked my purse beneath the service table, retrieving the mint green box with the silver clasp. Inside lay the photographs of Sarah and Henry in the hotel, the printed text messages with his crude promises, the note I had composed, "She slept with my husband. I waited until the right moment." I pressed the lid gently closed, feeling its weight like destiny. "Mom," I heard Nathan's voice, but he did not look at me. I did not flinch. I only smiled, cool and steady, knowing that at the exact moment they called for champagne and smiles, I would end this charade. The mood in the ballroom swelled again. Guests whispered about the dress code, the lighting, the seating order. Musicians tuned their strings. I allowed the applause from a rehearsal cue to wash over me. Underneath the decorum and floral opulence, under the fragile veneers of celebration, lay a woman forged of older steel than any gleaming sword. Tonight was the night of unveiling. Tonight, the world would witness that a woman, no matter how silent, no matter how unseen, could rise like a reckoning. My heart pounded once, twice. Then, slow and controlled, I let it steady. The cake was primed. The lights were dimmed. The cameras were on. And I was ready. I closed my eyes briefly, pressing the box to my chest. Dust and time and betrayal had carved away distractions until I stood here, unbreakable. I exhaled softly and stepped away from the cart. Tonight they would know whose story this was. Tonight the old witch became the witch of justice. The night air pressed heavy with summer warmth as Myra slipped onto my back porch, her footfalls silent on the old wooden boards. The cicadas droned in the hedges, and elsewhere a lone cricket struck out its mournful rhythm. I had not expected any visitor, especially not her, my old housekeeper, long dismissed and hardened by life. And yet there she was, her form silhouetted against the porch light, clutching a battered leather notebook and a manila envelope to her chest. "Mother Collins?" she whispered, her voice trembling with urgency. I set aside the herbal tea I had been preparing and let her in, stepping through the doorway into the dimmed kitchen. A single pendant light above the table cast soft shadows, illuminating the years etched into my hands as I set the tea tray down. My silver hair caught the light as I fixed her with a steady gaze. "Myra," I said, voice low but firm, "this is late." She nodded, moving closer until the notebook came into view. "I couldn't wait. You need to see this before the wedding." Her words trembled as though carrying a burden too heavy to bear. I gestured to the table and she slid into the chair opposite me. My heart tightened with a mixture of anticipation and dread. "Show me." Myra set the notebook before me and opened it to the first page. There, in faded ink and dated by time, were hotel receipts, scribbled notes, and, most telling, color photographs. The first 2 turned out to be young women, laughing, their arms curled around a man I recognized immediately. Henry, my husband. The third was even worse. Sarah, the bride-to-be, intimately close to him in the dim glow of a hotel corridor. I held my breath. The photographs were clear, Henry's arm around Sarah's waist, her head tilted toward him, her lips curved in a vulnerable smile. The evidence was undeniable. Beneath each photo, printed out in small stacks, were text messages. I slid my finger along the first one. "My wife is old now, but you're still fresh. That house will be yours soon." The second message made me shudder. "Your fiancé may be young, but I'm the one he's picking at midnight." And the third, "That child thinks he's marrying a bride. I want her knowing her prince shared beds with a grown man." I closed my eyes, feeling bile rise in my throat. I couldn't speak. I needed to feel every drop of anger, betrayal, and hurt. "Henry dismissed me when he found me snooping in his office," Myra continued, her voice tight. "He fired me because I saw things I was never supposed to see, receipts for hotel stays, payments to girls I couldn't identify, texts I couldn't unsee. A slow, simmering rage crept through me. I clenched the edge of the table, fingernails digging into wood. "He never told me," I said finally. "He always told me he was traveling, that he had business meetings." Myra nodded. "He told me the same." But I couldn't stay quiet. Not now. I drew a slow breath, recalling our 60 years of marriage. The first house we built by hand, the garden we planted with roses he grew with his own green thumb. I recalled the nights spent reading by candlelight, the years of low wages and tax troubles, and the night he promised to love me until death parted us. I remembered when he first sidestepped me, late nights, urgent phone calls, changed passwords. But I never suspected this. No, not this. I rose from my chair and walked to the window. The night sky hung heavy over the yard. My hands shook slightly. "They're getting married in 2 nights," I said. I turned, looking at Myra's earnest face. "I have to go through with the rehearsal. I cannot collapse in front of everyone. But after that, everything changes." Myra's lips trembled. "I brought everything," she said softly. "The photos, the messages, even the dates. I printed them all for you." I nodded, swallowing. "We cannot expose them now, at least not yet." My hands trailed down the side of the table, where the envelope lay. I snapped it open gently, revealing printed copies of texts. "I need copies to plan. I need the evidence ready." She slid them across the table, hands steady now, face determined. "We're safe. No one else knows." I reached for the photos and text printouts, running my fingers over the edges as though they carried heat. No tears came. Grief would not help me now. Fury coursed instead, cold, precise, unwavering. "Thank you," I said, surprising us both with the firmness of my voice. "Thank you for keeping this from him until I was ready." Myra exhaled. "I couldn't let you walk into that wedding blind." I placed everything back in the envelope, then closed the notebook. "Do you want to stay?" I asked. The question pounded quietly in the silence between us. She nodded. "I'll stay if you want someone with you." I offered a gentle smile. "I think I can handle the rehearsal alone. But on the night," I paused, meeting her eyes, "on the wedding night, I will need your help." Her relief was palpable. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "I won't let you down again." We sat in silence, 2 women bound by loyalty and love, amidst betrayal that threatened to unravel all we had built. The night outside moved on, unconcerned. Inside, after a lifetime of quiet sacrifice, I was ready to wage a very public reckoning. I nodded and rose. "We'll finish this tomorrow." "The rehearsal." She followed me to the front door, where the cicadas still droned. I opened it, then paused and turned back. "Thank you," I said again. "For not letting me walk blind." She smiled softly. "You don't need lessons in strength, Mother Collins." I closed the door behind her and leaned against the wood. My heart pounded, the engine of determination roaring in my chest. There would be no funeral for my marriage tonight, only the gathering of proof for the graves it had dug. I hung the notebook and envelope in the drawer, where I would assemble my plan. Beside them went the note I had prepared. "She slept with my husband." I waited until the right moment. Tomorrow they would still think I was silent, but I would be plotting. 2 nights until justice. 2 nights to overturn their perfect world. 2 nights to remind them who I was, not a relic to be brushed aside, but an architect of truth. I turned off the light and walked upstairs into an empty house that held too many memories. And finally, I permitted myself to tremble, not with fear or sorrow, but with the calm electricity of resolve. The reckoning had begun. I stepped out of the cab in front of Leclerc's patisserie just as the spring sun began to dip low against the horizon. The shop lay on a street I had known for decades, once bustling with neighbors grabbing pastries after morning mass, now quieter, but still bathed in nostalgia. I adjusted my emerald velvet dress in the rearview mirror before stepping out, clutching tightly the manila envelope containing the photos, printed messages, and the single handwritten note. This shop was the birthplace of the cake I had shared with Henry 40 years ago, our wedding anniversary cake, the one that symbolized our love and partnership. Today, it would become something else entirely. As I crossed the cobbled sidewalk, my heels clicked softly against the stones. I paused at the door, smoothing the fabric of my dress and taking a steadying breath. Going inside now would be like walking through time, but with a purpose sharpened by betrayal, not nostalgia. The bell above the door jingled as I entered. The shop smelled of sugar and vanilla, the warmth comforting and familiar. Behind the counter stood Mark Leclerc, the same man who had mixed the vanilla batter for our anniversary cake so long ago. His hands were dusted with flour, and he looked just as surprised to see me now as I had expected. "Mrs. Collins," he said, wiping his hands on his apron. "It's been quite a few years." I offered a calm smile and laid the envelope gently on the counter. "Mark, I need another cake, a wedding cake, 3 tiers, classic white fondant, something elegant." He nodded, curious. "Of course. Any special requests?" I reached for the dress I'd chosen to wear, smoothing my hand across the velvet folds. "Yes, the middle tier has to hold something inside it, something small and wooden wrapped in fondant. It needs to stay secure until the cut." He paused, his brow furrowing. "Are we still using the same flavor, raspberry filling?" I froze for a heartbeat before answering. "No." My voice was steady, confident. "This time, I choose justice." Mark's eyes narrowed slightly. "Justice?" I pulled the wooden box from my purse and set it beside our records of flavor options. He lifted it, weighed it in his hands, then looked back at me. "Fine," he said after a pause. "We'll do it. The middle tier will be fortified with a cavity just big enough for the box, wrapped securely in fondant so it won't fall out, but thin enough that, when cut, it reveals itself." I nodded. "Exactly." As we spoke, I quietly opened the manila envelope and withdrew the black and white photographs. The first showed Henry and Sarah in a hotel corridor. The second captured Henry's arm around her waist outside a restaurant. Underneath them, I had printed the salacious texts. "My wife is old now. You're the one I want, and that house will be yours. Your fiancé might think he's marrying her, but I was taste before the wife. White dress tonight? Let me dress you in darker things first." I handed the photos and message printouts one by one to Mark. He accepted them with a quiet professionalism, his brow still creasing, but no words escaping him. I watched him. I had not come here to cry. I had come to set the stage for a reckoning. My skin warmed with determination. Finally, Mark set the printouts down carefully. "Is this public? Are you sure?" I met his gaze firmly. "Eleanor won't see until the cake falls apart. And yes, I've thought it through." He nodded. "All right, we'll do what we must. Any specific decoration?" I drew the box's note from the envelope, in my handwriting, bold and unending, so that there would be no mistaking who wrote it. "She slept with my husband. I waited until the right moment." I placed it in Mark's hand. The dark cursive letters gazed back at both of us. He inhaled softly. "This note. You want it inside too?" "Exactly," I confirmed. He hesitated a moment, then folded the note and added it to the papers. I stepped back and arranged my purse as though I were a customer finalizing an order. My voice remained controlled as I said, "Delivery standard, please, around 6 tomorrow evening, set up at the hotel. Middle tier intact but ready to collapse under proper slicing." Mark nodded and began writing notes on the order slip. Dimensions, hidden cavity, firmness of fondant, placement of toppers. I lingered a moment as he worked. My heart felt calm, cold, resolute. Finally, Mark looked up. "It's ready. I'll oversee it myself to make sure nothing goes wrong." I gave him a small nod. "Thank you." Stepping away, I paused by the display window. The setting sun cast a soft gleam across the polished cakes, a reminder that sweetness could hide something bitter. I traced a finger along the glass before turning to leave. Outside, the evening air was cooler. I lifted my chin. In my purse, the photo evidence and printed messages lay silent but powerful. The wooden box, small, unassuming, contained everything I needed. I felt the weight of my purpose. I would walk into that ballroom tomorrow, carrying the legacy of 40 years, not as a casualty, but as a woman claiming justice through calm, purposeful action. I climbed into the waiting cab. As it pulled away, I looked back at Leclerc's sign. "See you tomorrow," I murmured, more to myself than anyone else. The cake would do its work. The world would see the truth unfold, and at the center of their celebration would be the reckoning they never expected. Tonight, Justice was baking itself under fondant and sugar. Tomorrow they would taste it. I stood in the dim glow of 1,000 crystal chandeliers, their glints refracting across the polished marble floor of the grand ballroom. The scent of peonies and myrrh floated in the air, heavy with anticipation. All around me, elegantly dressed guests murmured and clicked their phone cameras, while waiters in crisp white jackets carried silver trays of champagne. A live-stream camera, the couple's carefully selected videographer, hovered at the edge of the dais, capturing every smile, every gesture of staged joy. On stage, Nathan and Sarah stood side by side in front of the towering 3-tiered wedding cake, its tiers swaddled in white fondant, dotted with sugar pearls. Nathan wore a navy tuxedo with a satin lapel, his hand resting possessively on Sarah's waist. She gleamed in ivory lace and silk, laughter spilling from her lips as she looked out at the dozen tables of family, friends, and important influencers. Their perfect moment, an hour of televised perfection about to unfold. My husband, Henry, sat to my right at the head table. His posture was rigid, jaw clenching every time Sarah smiled at him. His eyes never left her. He thought I did not notice. I did. Across the room, I embraced stillness. My emerald velvet dress hugged my shoulders. In my lap rested the proof I had entrusted to the pastry chef. Inside this cake, buried under sweet layers, lay the reckoning. The master of ceremonies stepped to the microphone. His voice was warm, polished like reflected light. "Ladies and gentlemen, it is time for the cake." His words carried like a cue. The ballroom hushed. Nathan lifted Sarah's hand to guide the silver knife into the top tier. Cameras zoomed closer, glasses clinked in anticipation. 3, 2, 1. The MC counted down. A clean slice sank through the first tier, vanilla sponge revealed. Applause and gasps of delight followed. Sarah took a taste, her lips pink and innocent. My heart tightened with resolve. She did not yet know, but soon she would. Nathan drew the knife deeper, into the second layer. The blade struck something hard, a box. A dull crack, a shift, a collective gasp. Chairs scraped. I rose slowly, calm but resolute. The box tumbled, thudding against the cake stand and dropping onto the floor. For a breathless second, no one moved. Then a swirl of movement erupted. Guests craned for their phones. Waiters froze. The live feed stuttered. The cameras jerked. My chest was tight, but my voice remained silent. Sarah blinked at the box. Nathan stared, his face caught between confusion and alarm. Henry sprang from his seat, pushing past the table. He lunged toward the stage. I took a step forward, smooth as oil, and spoke, not raising my voice, but firm. "Sarah, would you like to open it?" She stood, legs shaking, barely able to bend to the box. She lifted the lid. Photos spilled out, glossy shots of her and Henry in dim hotels, arms entwined, lips close in kisses captured in soft focus. Beneath them were sheets of printed text. "Wife's too old now. You're the one I want. You want that house, don't you? White dress tonight? Let me dress you in darker things first. Your fiancé thinks he's marrying a bride. I'm the woman building a future." The words hovered in the harsh glow of truth. Sarah dropped to her knees, hands over her mouth. Nathan froze. Henry stood beside me, face crimson. He shook his head. "You wicked witch, you set me up like this." His shout reverberated across the shocked silence, like thunder over a still lake. I held my ground, my voice steady. Betrayal burrows deep. Sometimes it must be excavated. My gaze locked on Sarah. "You were promised a future, but you were only promised illusions." Sarah's tears spilled quietly. She whispered, "I thought he loved me." I looked at Henry calmly. This was not orchestrated. It was discovered, inside the cake, like truth buried until force reveals it. I turned to Nathan. "Son, the woman you're marrying is not the only one he betrayed, nor was she promised the truth." Tears filled Nathan's eyes, his fingers trembling around Sarah's. The MC stepped forward, voice choked. "Security, please clear the area." Henry's shout cut through again. "She's the liar and the saboteur." He took a breath and screamed, "She did it to humiliate me." I raised one hand, quiet but unyielding. "This is not humiliation. This is exposure. If deceit had stayed hidden, it would have poisoned every corner of their marriage and your life. Henry shoved pathetically toward me, but security intervened. He was held back, his face contorted with rage. Nathan stepped forward, reaching for a photo on the floor. That's not true, Mom, I turned to him softly. It is true, Nathan, and you deserve better than a marriage built on lies. He stared at me for a moment. Betrayal, grief, shame swirled in his eyes. He swallowed. Mom? His voice cracked. Sarah's cries filled the hush. I looked around. The live stream flickered. Guests stood frozen, wine glasses trembling in their hands. The perfect wedding facade had shattered. I spoke once more. Sarah, Nathan, truth is a foundation that endures. You can still choose honesty, or collapse under this. Henry's eyes slammed shut. He drew a shuddering breath. He could not speak further. The weight of exposure crushed him. I stepped off the dais. My every movement deliberate, composed. The spotlight caught the sparkle in my eyes, not bitterness but clarity. I chose to walk away, leaving them to their choices. As I passed the crumbling cake, I glanced at Sarah. Her face was streaked with tears. I whispered to her quietly, "May this be your turning point, not your downfall." And then I stepped away from the chaos, away from broken lies and broken hearts, toward a calm I had not yet claimed, but would soon. The ballroom was frozen as I left, but my steps echoed conviction. The night had changed. Forever. The air trembled with tension long after the cake collapse, as though every heart in that glittering room had frozen in place. I remained seated, glass of orange juice in hand, unassuming, yet utterly composed. The live-stream cameras still hovered, capturing every trembling emotion. The attendants in crisp black suits, and the guests in their gowns and tuxedos, stood in uneasy circles around broken cake shards. Silence stretched thin, pregnant with accusation, with fear, with the violent truth that no amount of flowers or fairy lights could mask. Nathan's face was a tempest, his jaw clenched tight, blood pulsing in his temples. He shoved through the stunned crowd and planted himself before me. His voice cracked like the fragile ice of broken trust. "I am going to sue you for destroying my life, you rancid old hag." He spat the words, each syllable heavy with loathing. The polite veneer of the evening had cracked, exposing raw hurt. He advanced as though ready to strike. His eyes burned with betrayal, not merely anger. Sarah's sobs punctuated the charged quiet. Her knees buckled beside the stage. She cupped her face, shoulders shaking. "You want to ruin me, don't you?" she cried, voice ragged. "This is exactly what he promised me. He needed me to do." Tears streamed down her cheeks, mascara smudging her ivory gown. "I did everything he asked. I did everything he said I had to do." My calm remained unshaken. I raised my glass and sipped once, deliberately. The sweetness of orange contrasted sharply with the bitterness of the moment. I set the glass down and met both of their gazes evenly. "Congratulations, Nathan," I began, voice soft but crystalline. "Today you officially join a household I built with my hands and tears, and I see someone has been quietly gnawing away at it, tiny bite by tiny bite." I paused, letting the sheer absurdity of the blown-up wedding linger in the air. Nathan flinched, and Sarah's sobs stuttered. Henry rose so fast I almost smiled. His fist shot up, ready to strike me across the table. Before he even verbalized his rage, I spoke again, calmly, sharply. "Domestic violence, Henry? Do you really intend to go to jail and leave your mistress to deal with the wreckage by herself?" My words struck him like a thrown pebble in a pond, ripples of horror spreading across his face. He froze, finger poised mid-air, caught between instinct and shame. Nathan staggered as if punched. He cocked his head, processing the shift. His voice was tighter now, less furious, more confused. "You? Do you really think this is fine? That I should be proud?" I touched the table lightly, drawing the spotlight away from his rage. "No, Nathan. I do not think you should be proud of marrying a woman who slept with your father and pointed the way out when our marriage was crumbling." My tone remained resolved. "What I think you should feel is shock. You deserve to see what truth feels like when it shatters in illusion." Sarah raised her head. Guilt and sorrow flashed across her face. Quivering, she whispered, "He promised me everything. Money, a house, a future." Her voice fractured on the last word. I returned her gaze. What he did was promise you bricks and mortar, not loyalty, not honesty. He traded affection for collateral, and when it suited him, he tossed you into a cake so I could show the world what he'd been carving beneath. At that, Henry lurched as though struck, his face twisted. He tried to retort, but the words came out broken. Nathan held up one hand to stop him, then turned back to me, expression hollow. Mom, all I ever wanted was a normal wedding, a mother's blessing. I exhaled slowly. I gave you years of blessings, son. I gave you years of love, and not once did I erase myself for free. Tonight, I showed you why I could not keep silent when the foundation crumbled. My calm honesty cut through the tension as sharply as any knife. The crowd parted to make space around us, their eyes alight with curiosity and fear. A few guests whispered among themselves about lawsuits. Others turned off their phone cameras, not wanting to record what felt too real to be spectacle. The event stylists hovered, unsure whether to intervene or flee. Nathan swallowed. He shoved his hands into his pockets. He was my father. I thought he loved us both. My smile was quiet, painful. Yes, he was your father. He loved the idea of us, perhaps the facade. But you, my son, you deserved better than shadows stitched into your vows. A fragile hush followed. Henry drew himself up, chest heaving, fists still curled. You have ganged up on me, he managed, voice low. You took my wife, my home. I leaned forward slightly, eyes narrowing. No, Henry, I took truth, the truth I've carried for far too long. Pausing, I considered my next words. And in exposing this, I offered you a choice, to face it honestly. You chose silence, not love. That's on you. With that, Henry sagged, his fiery posture deflating into stunned guilt. Nathan exhaled louder than his inhale. Sarah glanced between us, her tears now steady and resigned. A distant staff member approached, quietly informing security. A hush swept across the room. I stood, glass in hand, composure intact. I've nothing more to say, I announced, voice firm, measured. The truth has been served. I turned away from Nathan, from Henry, and walked deliberately toward the exit. Nathan called my name, voice edged with sorrow. Mom, wait! I paused in the doorway. With a single soft look, I signaled that there was nothing left to salvage tonight. I stepped out of the ballroom, leaving shattered cake, shattered hearts, and the remnants of a facade that would never hold again. As the doors closed behind me, the ballroom lights dimmed. Inside lay confusion, guilt, chaos. Outside awaited the night, silence, and the beginnings of a life reclaimed. I stepped back from the shattered cake display, the lingering gasps of the guests trailing after me like shadows. I held the printed list of names and photos in hand, 4 women, including Sarah, each face framed by betrayal. Tonight was not over. It was time for the final unveiling. I cleared my throat and raised my voice, calm yet commanding enough to still the ballroom. The murmurs hushed as eyes turned to me. Ladies and gentlemen, I promised you the full picture. It does not begin or end with Sarah. I held the list up. This is a record of 4 women my husband seduced under the guise of love, promise, or opportunity. Sarah is simply the last. A hush fell over the crowd, broken only by the quiet rustle of silk and whispered disbelief. Myriads of phones clicked on, recording every second. But I did not flinch. Here was the culmination of months of proof, of confessions, of shattered silence. It was time to share it all. Henry tensed, his posture stiff as a drawn bow. Nathan grabbed Sarah's arm, pulling her closer behind him, shielding her with his body, but it was too late. I gestured toward the far end of the room, where a tall woman sat, pale in the glow of candlelight. She wore an unruly bun and a simple dress, nothing like the glittering guests around her. But she stood out. "Michelle," I called softly. "Will you please come forward?" At first the woman made no move. Then she rose, steady and dignified in her soft step approach. The guests leaned forward, curiosity crackling in the air. Michelle was 19, I continued, voice unwavering. She met Henry in room 24 of a local hotel. She trusted him. He made promises she believed. Michelle stopped a few feet from me. I raised my hand and let her take the list of printed evidence. She examined the pages, her fingers brushing over screenshots of messages, dates, and hotel receipts. Her eyes flicked up to me, Gratitude and sorrow mingled in her gaze. Then, with astonishing clarity, she lifted a glass of white wine from a nearby guest's table and hurled it at Nathan's face. The glass shattered against his cheek, the liquid searing warmth splashing down his tuxedo shirt. A collective gasp echoed through the room, and Sarah recoiled, tears flooding her face. Nathan reeled backward, shocked, blinking rapidly to clear his vision. Blood mixed with wine, trailing from a cut on his scalp. The room erupted. Guests leaped from their seats, music died. The live stream feed jolted and rewound. "Do you remember me?" Michelle screamed, voice loud and clear but quivering with emotion. "Room 204. I was 19. Her words cut the haze of celebration like ice. She held up her phone, showing photos of that night, Henry's hand on her waist, her eyes brimming with trust, the hotel key stub with date and room scrawled on it. The crowd leaned in, Henry's face drained pale, his mouth parting but no words coming. Sarah covered her mouth, horrified. Nathan staggered toward his father, reaching out but stumbling on his ruined cake floor. "Dad?" he croaked. Michelle leveled her gaze at Henry. "You took advantage of me. You told me I would have more attention, more stability. I was young, I believed you," her voice caught. "That night destroyed something in me. This is me undoing your lies." I stepped forward. There are 3 more women like Michelle in that list, all deceived, all abandoned when it was convenient. My voice swept across the ballroom, capturing every eye. Tonight, they deserve to be heard too, but Michelle is enough truth for now. Behind me, Henry stumbled backward, losing his composure. His voice cracked. "Stop this! This is insane!" But no one listened. The guests had gathered around Michelle, shielding her anger with empathy. Nathan stood still, torn. Sarah crawled to him, breathless. "Mom, what? Why?" My son's face crumbled with shame and realization. I didn't know." I laid a hand on his shoulder. "Now you do." Michelle's tears glistened. She turned to the guests and said, "This isn't spectacle, it is accountability." Her words quieted the last of the whispers. Security moved in but held back. They felt the momentum shift too. Henry tried to intervene. "That was ancient history," he protested. "They all lied." Michelle shook her head. "Do not lie for him now." Her resolve froze him. Nathan hesitated, torn between his wife's broken vows and the mother he had ignored. I held the list one final time. These lives were discarded like leftovers, hidden away so no spotlight could shine on them. My voice softened. Tonight, those shadows have faces and voices. At that moment, the entire scene felt suspended. An old-world ballroom transformed into an arena of raw truth. Forks clattered as guests dropped them on tables. Drones buzzed overhead, capturing every instant. Henry looked at me, eyes wide with fear. Nathan's face was ashen, grief-riddled. Sarah crumpled to her knees, her sobs racking her shoulders. Michelle stood triumphant, her courage rebranded in the mechanics of justice. Security gently guided Michelle back to her chair, offering comfort. I sank into my spot across from Henry. My gaze swept the room. Let this be the truth that defines tonight. No more buried stories, no more protected lies. The silence was absolute, until Nathan whispered, "Mom?" but stopped halfway, wordless. I nodded at Michelle, then rose to leave. The blast from that eruption of confrontation faded to a low hum as guests processed what they'd witnessed. The veil of perfection torn away, the facade broken. Myriads of phones still recorded the aftermath, the storm I orchestrated by steel and determination. But I no longer cared who watched. The truth had spoken. I walked away, shoulders steady, toward the exit where Myra waited. Behind me, room lights dimmed. Fairy tale illusions shattered like brittle glass. Compact sands of deception had collapsed, leaving raw earth. Outside, warm summer air greeted me like sunrise after a long winter. I lifted the list, the photos, the raw evidence of courage. Myriads of voices erupted behind me, but all I felt was the weight being lifted off my back, and the broken, triumphant clarity that comes only when lies finally come undone. Quorum, Shaurum, Edgur. The grand ballroom was collapsing under the weight of revelation. Chairs were asked to be left unattended, as guests rose in confusion and left unsteadily, abandoning tables of half-finished meals. The MC's voice cracked over the muted speakers before he snapped, "I'm sorry, folks, music has stopped." The string quartet's bows stilled. The once pristine live stream froze, then ended abruptly. Cell phones went dark one by one, as shocked audiences fled into the night, whispers trailing through the hall like a sudden frost. Sarah's parents stood, shoulders stiff, heads bowed. Without exchange, they turned on their heels and walked away, leaving her alone, tears staining the embroidery of her dress. They left in silent estrangement, a wordless judgment sharper than accusation. Nathan's face contorted with rage and grief. He squared his shoulders and screamed with all the force of his shattered world. "None of you ever wanted me here. You've treated me like a burden my whole life." His voice shattered the hush, echoing against varnished wood floors and chandelier crystals. Still seething, I lifted my glass of orange juice, its bright hue mocking the darkness of the moment. I smiled a bitter, proud smile. "If carrying burdens built houses, funded your schooling, and kept your father out of debt, then I would happily burden myself for life. But today, I put it down." My tone was calm, resolute, the pinnacle of my purpose. At my words, Nathan's fury burned brighter. He lashed out physically, swinging a fist that struck Henry's jaw with sickening impact. "My own father slept with my fiancée. You are a fucking monster. Why didn't you just die before doing this to us?" The blow sent Henry staggering backwards, his glass tumbling from his hand, spilling its contents in a slow-motion betrayal. Pandemonium exploded. A dinner guest yelled, "Call 911!" and practically sprinted from the hall. Another stumbled, bumping into a table and overturning champagne bottles. Chairs collapsed. The string quartet finally dropped their instruments in shock. Somewhere beyond the polished entrance, police sirens began to wail, closing in on the unraveling scene. A pair of uniformed officers burst in, staying near the doorway to assess the chaos. They waded into the crowd of panicked guests. Security guards herded people toward exits, trying to restore order amid outrage and fear. Nathan, chest heaving, still glared down at Henry. His fists shook. Henry coughed, dazed and reeling, as the police secured Nathan in handcuffs. His voice quivered, fractured. This isn't what it looks like." But there was nothing to salvage. Another officer cuffed Henry, giving Nathan a look of sympathetic regret as he did. "Enough," a policeman said. "Come on." Sarah, sobbing, glared at her father and fiancé as they were led away. Her knees buckled, and she slumped to the floor, her cries echoing with finality. I stood tall, heart pounding but soul steady. The air was thick, tense, and heavy with raw truth. The stolen buzz of celebration was gone, replaced by aching silence and broken lives. The sparkle of crystal and silk had been replaced by grime, literally and morally. A fresh wave of guests poured out through arches, faces pale, eyes wide. Some cried, others whispered prayers. A few approached me, offering condolences or asking for explanations. None stayed. They passed through the storm of my vengeance and fled. The MC, microphone dropped at his feet, stared at me. His voice trembled when he finally regained composure. "Ma'am, are you all right?" I glanced at him, letting the moment stretch. "I built this life," I said softly, more to myself than to him. "Built it with patience, but tonight I tore down lies." Miri Myra emerged from the back, silent support in human form. She placed a steady hand on my shoulder. I inhaled the cool crackle of night air seeping through the tall, open doors. The moment glimmered with closure. Sirens were closer now. Police officers approached me. "Ma'am, we may need your statement," one said gently. I nodded once. Resolute, "I'll tell the truth." Arrest protocols were already unfolding. Nathan and Henry were escorted toward police vehicles waiting outside. Their faces were etched with regret and disbelief. Nathan saw me across the room, eyes hollow, pain and recognition whispering in his gaze. He mouthed "Mom," but words failed him. I watched through the crowd of officers and paramedics and distraught guests. Sarah was comforted by an aunt as she sobbed uncontrollably. Her mother knelt beside her, holding her shoulders. The night had fractured lives beyond repair. I took one last look at the ruined tablescape. Cake crumbs, spilled drinks, toppled centerpieces, detritus of deception, bright evidence of my public revelation. My statement had landed. The truth had burned through pretense and privilege. American 911 dispatch blared out faintly from outside. It would sleep therapists for another night. Police vehicles idled beneath street lamps, lights pulsing red and blue. An ambulance siren joined them as medics checked Sarah. It was time to go. I unlocked Myra's arm from my shoulder and faced the officers assisting with Nathan and Henry. I tilted my head, steady. Do what you must. They have everything they need. Officers nodded. They guided Nathan and Henry out, footsteps echoing final judgment. I turned away, feeling a curious lightness. My burden was down, my soul was intact. Myra and I walked toward the exit. A solitary valet attendant lingered, holding open a limo door I hadn't ordered. He glanced at me with sympathetic respect and gestured, obsolete but kind. I paused to look back at the demolished scene, lights flickering from police cruisers, the marble floor stained. It was the end of an era's illusion. Then I stepped forward. Myra followed. The door closed. We drove off quietly as the hotel's back entrance disappeared into the night's flicker of streetlights. Sirens retreated. The broken celebration faded into stillness. In the back seat, Myra whispered, "You did it." I closed my eyes, resting my cheek against the leather seat, finally exhaling. I laid it to rest. We pulled away from shattered vows, broken hearts, false promises, and toward a horizon neither of them could follow. The night had ended their show. It had ended their control. And it had begun mine. Dawn broke gently over the neighborhood the morning after the chaos, as though the world dared pretend nothing had happened. I stepped out of the car in silence, Myra holding the passenger door for me. No family rushed forward, no concerned faces hovered, only the soft hum of early traffic and birdsong drifting in through the open gate. Myra closed the car door and offered me her arm in a gesture that felt more like kinship than any blood tie had in years. Together, we walked up the path toward my front porch, where geraniums nodded in the cool breeze. The house was quiet in its own relief, as if it had been holding its breath through the night's havoc. Inside, I let out a long breath and leaned against the doorframe for a moment, surveying the living room. No cameras, no stale conferences. Like whispers, just the early light and the memory of every confrontation that had led to this morning. Myra followed me in, gently closing the front door behind us. She moved to the kitchen and quietly began preparing tea, as though this was a ritual she had known all her life. I wandered to the garden room, where my battered leather notebook lay on the writing desk, beside an empty chair and a pair of reading glasses. The pages were full of my memories, but also of today's victory. I touched the cover and felt the weight I had lifted off my heart begin to settle into my bones. It had taken years of endurance, but this dawn was proof that truth could prevail. Myra set a steaming cup of chamomile tea beside me at the table. She carried her own, still with that same soft strength that had amazed me 2 nights ago. I nodded at her in gratitude, my first genuine smile in days, and I meant it, for both of us. For us. "She's gone," she said gently. "Sarah disappeared with the money. She's off the radar." I stirred my tea without looking up. "Good riddance," I replied quietly. "Wherever they chose to run, they'll never outrun themselves." We sat in companionable silence for a moment before I continued. "Nathan and Henry keep calling," I said. "They want me to testify in their lawsuits, suing each other for everything from emotional distress to breach of trust. They even offered me money, a trust fund, just to stay silent." Myra glanced at me. "What will you do?" I set my cup down firmly. "I will continue ignoring them. They can fight all they want. I will always give testimony to truth, but I will not play into their drama anymore." Outside, the wind rustled through my rose bushes. The petals dusted pink in the early light. I slipped outside to the garden, barefoot, feeling the freshly mowed grass beneath my feet. Life here had become concrete and calm again, peace born from the wreckage of lies. A month later, I found myself in the same chair in that garden room, a soft breeze drifting through the window, as I replayed the livestream video on my phone. It began with my arrival at the wedding rehearsal, the gleam of chandeliers, the smug smile on Sarah's face, that entire charade frozen on camera. I listened to my own voice, clear, steady, unapologetic. And then came the hush as the cake collapsed, and the shock wave erupted. I let out a small laugh, more relief than amusement, as I watched the power shift from illusion to truth. Setting the phone down, I opened my notebook to a clean page, closed my eyes for a moment to steady my pulse, and wrote the last line in my easiest hand. I do not need apologies. I need them to remember. This old woman is not blind, not mute, and not weak. Myra entered, carrying a plate with 2 warm scones she had made from scratch. She set the plate down gently beside me. The scent of honey and butter filled the room. I pushed the notebook aside and reached for a scone, feeling whole, steady, and alive in the quiet morning glow. My eyes drifted to the window. The world outside was waking up. Mail trucks, joggers, bikes passing by, but inside these walls I had reclaimed something far greater than routine. I had reclaimed my dignity, my strength, my voice. I leaned forward and whispered to the empty room, almost to myself. Victory isn't always loud. Sometimes it's the echo of truth in silence. I sipped my tea, the warmth rising through me like a promise. Myra sat down across from me. She reached out and touched my hand. "You're a legend," she said softly. I shook my head, smiling. Just a woman who wouldn't be invisible anymore. Together we sat in the stillness, 2 survivors of a storm we had faced head-on. Let the rest of them bicker over lawsuits and secrets. I had my garden, my notebook, my truth, and someone who loved me not for what I had, but for who I was. When I finally closed my notebook and stood to clear the dishes, I paused one last time at the window. The golden morning light fell across the garden and the blooms seemed to glow in solidarity. I inhaled deeply. Then I turned away and stepped into my kitchen. No fanfare, no audience, just freedom, and that was more than enough. If you stayed with me until the last word, thank you. Stories like this one, real, raw, and long buried, are not just meant to be heard, they're meant to be remembered. Not every woman gets her justice served at a wedding with a slice of cake and a truth bomb, but every woman who has ever been silenced, betrayed, or discarded deserves to see that one day the quietest voice in the room can become the loudest echo in someone's memory. This wasn't just about revenge, it was about reclaiming worth, one truth at a time. If this story spoke to something inside you, your strength, your silence, your scars, I invite you to subscribe to Grandma True Stories. Because out here on the porch of life, I've got more to tell. Stories they thought I'd never live long enough to speak. Stories that remind us all, wisdom doesn't shout, it remembers. And when a grandma speaks, the world finally listens. Subscribe now. I'll be right here waiting to tell you the next one.